Hello, everybody. So excited to be here today. My name is Star Lutzis, and I'm with Aligning Purpose Publishing. And we have Naudia D here. She is a brand new author, just started her 7-book series. First one out, The Cage. I've read it. It's amazing. I love it. Thank you so much, Naudia, for being here.
Yes. Thank you, Star.
And yeah, I'm excited to just kind of like take a deep dive into The Cage because there's really so much to kind of like unpack, and I feel like it's that book that you've been waiting for, and to know that there's like 7 more or 6 more coming, that's exciting. So your vision behind The Cage really is to like inspire people, right? Getting them
Yeah.
to embrace their potential and how to evolve into the masterpiece that God's created them to be, right?
Right.
So can you just sort of share with us like what led you onto this journey of really like The Cage itself, and then to like inspire others?
Yes. So it's funny that you asked that question. I come from a lineage of women who are very spiritual beings, right? But they were very private beings. And so when I decided to write this book, which was about 10 years ago, believe it or not, um, the more I wrote, the more personal it was. And I thought, I can never write this book. I can never do it because it was exposing too much of spirituality and science and just telling too much of us, right? 10 years later, I would meet a lady by the name of Felina Brown, and never told anybody that I was going to write a book. And she said, hey, there's a book inside of you. You need to write this book. It's going to help other people. It's going to help other women, especially. Beautiful woman. And I knew in that moment that God was speaking through her to me. So I wrote the book. A year later, I get it copywritten, and I still don't do anything with it because I'm still completely afraid of like giving this book to the world. And my commander, who is an amazing commander, invested in me and got me a life coach by the name of Linda Zelnick. And I was really burnt out at the time. And she has a program called Burnout to Boom. And she really helped me to get out of this limited mindset of being encaged, of privacy and all of these things. And then she introduced me to you, Star, who is also completely amazing. I was talking to other publishers at the time, and you just came with a completely different energy, a completely different aura. And I thought, this is it. So it took you 3 women to really get me to get the book written, to get out of my head, and to get this book to the finish line. So thank you so much. You helped me to tap into my God-given potential and to become a masterpiece that God created me to be. So it's because of you 3 ladies that I'm right here today.
Wow. Yes. No. That is awesome. That's awesome. It is amazing how when we show up as ourselves, it really
Yeah.
does encourage other people to show up as themselves. And so the
Yes.
more we continue to do that, it's just going to grow and grow and grow. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. So to The Cage, you talk about I just got some notes here. There's a quote I wanted to read from your book.
Okay.
So it says, if you follow their rules and chase their ideals, which may then you can't, which, oh, hold on, sorry, which many are. Let's start over. If you follow their rules and chase their ideals, which many are, then you can become anything within the cage as long as they remain in control. In their minds, it's a win-win situation. All you must do is conform. And then you also talk about in your book how you had, gotten into the military and, found that camaraderie, that belonging, and you were like, yes, I'm out of the cage, but then realized, oh no, you're in another dimension of the cage. So kind of like talk to us about, that shift and how we can maybe like self-discern, are we living free or are we in another dimension?
That's really good. So the way you can discern whether you are living in a dimension or not is to become aware of cycles, right? And I'm going to give an answer to this that many people aren't going to like because we don't like to look in the mirror, right? So when you change jobs, when you change relationships, and you have the same outcome, brand new environment, you got a new boss, new colleagues, new everything, new title, new salary, and you're still miserable. You still hate the place, right? Or you find a new love and it's the still outcome. It's the same outcome, right? Where you're like, men are no good or this is awful. The problem is that you're the common denominator. And we don't want to ever face that. We never want to look at the fact that we are the common denominator, right? So when you realize that, okay, I've gone to a completely different environment and I'm still getting the same outcome, you're in another dimension of your cage, right? And so the way to get out of that cycle is to really work on you. Work on yourself. When you work on yourself, you don't have to go to another environment. Your environment will change for you. And everything that I tell you, I'm telling you from experience. You change yourself, your marriage will change. You don't have to get in another relationship. It will change. You don't have to get another job. It will change. You'll get promotions. You'll find joy. You'll find peace. You'll find those colleagues and that happiness. So I would say become aware of those cycles, understand that you're the common denominator, and work on yourself.
Wow, wow, wow. That's good. That is good. And I hear that, like, when you started, you don't want to hear this, right? Because we always don't want that. We want to be like, well, but that is really good. And it sounds like by not working on ourselves, right, we're just sort of like limiting ourselves into that cage mentality, right? So then, of course, we would continue to be in another dimension because we're not even letting ourselves out.
Yes. Yeah. And I think too, that's where a lot of people become victims. It's always somebody else's fault or it's the system or, you got to not become a victim in that situation. You got to put that mirror back on you and say, okay, I take control now. I'm going to change. I'm going to co-create. I'm going to create a different environment for myself.
Yes. Yeah. That is really good. And that kind of brings me to, talking about knowing the truth of the cage, understanding why, you were talking about, in your book, how you had known of the cage for a while before you wrote your book, right? And you were even trying to reach out to friends and family and people. Hey, do you kind of, just wanting to like bring this up, and got to the place where you were almost kind of like shunned back into the cage, right? And I feel like that could be such a normal thing where we really want to be out of the cage, but we keep kind of putting ourselves back just like quietly. So how would you say, like, what would you say to someone listening who they've quietly retreated back into the cage to like avoid being blacklisted?
I would say don't do it. I know that's the easiest answer, right? Don't do it. And this is coming from someone who did it for 4 years. I retreated for 4 years of my life and it felt like death. Okay. There's no other way to explain it. When you are chasing after your pursuit of purpose, when you're in that pursuit of purpose, when you're chasing after your dreams, when you're trying to find your truth, it is going to cost you some things, right? Because a lot of times we take on these identities that's not even us. It's not even our truth, right? It's what we've been told our whole lives. And so it's going to cost you some friendships, maybe some relationships. It's probably going to cost you your job, but it's all worth it. It's all worth it. So if I could tell you anything, it is to continue to move forward. Yes, it's going to cost you some things, but what you're going to get in return is far greater. It's far greater. So just keep moving forward. Keep going forward. It's going to hurt a little bit, maybe a lot, depending on how much you've attached yourself with these unhealthy attachments, but keep going forward. Keep going forward.
Yeah, that's really good. And that kind of ties me back to what you kind of had just said, of the misery, right? How you would, by staying in the cage, you keep, even if you're moving around, right? You're miserable, but to work on yourself to move forward through that, then you have that freedom. So that's really good. Now in your book, you talk about one of your first interactions with sort of the voice, right? The higher power when you hear from them. And so I'm going to read a quote here that says, this is the voice speaking. Well, the intent is not for you to escape the prison, but to demolish it so there is nothing to be brought back to. You created this prison with the closing of your heart in the same manner that the cage was created by others, with a closed heart. You did this solely out of fear. Instead of guarding your heart, you simply built a wall that traps it. Luckily for you, it is law for you not to remain this way forever. And there's so much in that. Just in that, right? Like, I'm just imagining, like hearing, and because there's freedom in knowing that, right? And knowing, one, that there's a solution, and the solution is, hey, shift how your heart is kind of showing up in the world.
Yes.
You're blocking it instead of guarding it, right? And I'm somebody who can absolutely relate to this, carrying around, my shield, I'm guarding my heart, it's like, and so I really would just love to know, like how would you kind of let me see, I wrote a question. I'd love for you to expand on the difference between having a guarded heart rather than your heart that's walled and trapped, and how you found more freedom living this way.
So life forces us or causes us to build these walls around our hearts, right? And men, believe it or not, have bigger walls than women. I don't know why, but they do. Okay. But it's life experiences. So pain, abuse, abandonment, disappointment, grief, guilt, disappointment, all those things, right? That causes you to grab a brick and continuously build that wall. And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people think like, there could be something wrong with that. It's not necessarily, you need that for survival, because you can't just go out here with a broken heart, or a true broken heart can kill you. Okay. But you have to make a choice to either continue to live in survival or to actually live. And in order to do that, you have to open up your heart, right? Now, there's this trend. We are having a spiritual consciousness, I think, in the world globally. The world is having a shift in their consciousness. And there's this huge push to heal, 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 right? But I think to answer this question, it's better to not just heal, but to understand the root of your wounds, right? Because when you understand the root of your wounds, when someone else comes, or you go to another job, or whatever that looks like, you will recognize that wound as somebody else. And it will no longer be a level of comfort. When you build that wall, what we don't realize is now your wall is trapped behind pain, abuse, abandonment, you think you're protecting yourself, but you're really just creating a level of comfort of those things, because that's where your heart is all the time. You're constantly protecting yourself. But when you understand the root of your wounds, when someone else comes along, you say, no, this is no longer comfortable for me. And your healing becomes natural, because then you start to go after those things that don't look like the bricks that you have in your around your heart. Right. So I would just say that understand the root of your wounds so that you don't continue to repeat that cycle. So you're not walking around with this big old wall, and you're not understanding why you can't be loved. You can't be loved because your heart is trapped behind this brick wall, Nobody loves me, or I keep having failed relationships. It's the same cycle, right? But once you understand the root of your wounds, you naturally heal. You don't even have to force yourself to heal. The body does its natural healing. And there's freedom in just walking in that, right? And knowing what your wounds are, how they were created, not to repeat them. So that when it comes along, you're like, no, I'm good, or you help them along the way, but you don't attach yourself to them. And so, yeah, so there's freedom in that. There's freedom in love. There's freedom in being open to being loved. I don't think we realize that when we put that wall up, we reject love, So that's the freedom that you get in that, in opening your heart back. But don't just open your heart wounded. Focus on those roots, right? So that's what I would say.
Yes, wow, that was beautiful. And you do like a fasting for people, and to kind of like help in all of this. And really just by listening to you, and I'm sure everybody out here who's listening is kind of like, okay, how do I get more of Naudia D? Where do I get the cage? Right, we got that for you. The link is going to be up here for you. And so tell us really what it's like to what it's like to go through the fasting, and share with us about that.
So the fasting that I prefer is the 21-day fast. It is a spiritual fast. It's not like what we see in the media right now, which I think is a huge distraction of this intermittent fasting. That requires you to focus purely on the physical. When you do spiritual fasting, you tap into your divine power. You're really awakening that divine power within, right? You're increasing your spiritual while decreasing the physical. So a 21-day fast will help you tap into that divine power. You will understand your external connection to God plus the ounce of God that he gave you, right? That's within. And so a 21-day spiritual fast, I want to be clear on that. A 21-day spiritual fast helps you to really tap into that power that's within you. You may not realize it, but as you go through, you will. And doing this fast with hundreds of men and women, mostly women, I know for a fact that they can tap into it. People have experienced miracles and health changes. And yes, you can lose weight, but you realize at the end that this wasn't about weight. This was really about me getting connected back to me and to God.
Wow, yeah, that's beautiful. And I liked how you talked about, the miracles that can come from that. And I'm just wondering, do you have any stories? I know I've heard stories where people would have, carrying like just like weight, pain, and then realizing, shifting, spiritually and just kind of like letting things go, and then all of a sudden they're healed of tons of things. So I know that you've walked people through fasting before. Is there anything that you can kind of share?
I've seen so many things from people's health turning around. I had a diabetic in one of my groups. I think she was having some nerve damage with her feet. She was not able to necessarily walk very well. Her prayer had nothing to do with her. You set a prayer for every fast that you do. But by the end of her fast, she was able to not just walk on her feet, but she was able to run on her feet. So that was huge. She said, I wasn't even praying for myself, and yet God healed me during this process. There are other things like material things that have come to light where people were praying or fasting for a home or getting out of debt. And they got that. They would go to closing, and when they get to closing, they thought that they owed all of this money, and there was a miscalculation on their mortgage. It was like, wait a minute, what? You only have to pay 200, and you were expected to pay 12,000. How does that happen, right? But they were in fasting and they were in prayer, and I think that there are other miracles too. I've seen where artists specifically, like makeup artists and hairstylists, they just wanted to tap into their talents, right? And they have become phenomenal. Some have moved to Hollywood, and it's just like, wow, they were really praying for something big, and it happened, right? Um, Beyond just praying for those things to like receive something, I think that fasting, especially the type that I do, we focus on tapping within. And when you learn how to tap within that divine power, you end up creating what we call miracles. And then you realize, wait, it's not just a miracle. I'm actually a co-creator with God. And so that's what I want to get people to see. It's like, yeah, there are miracles, but baby, you're co-creating it when you tap into your divine power.
Yes, yes. I mean, if this doesn't make you want to go get the cage, I don't know. I'm excited I've read it. I'm excited for more people to read it. It's powerful, and I love how you make it so easy to identify yourself in the cage, right? Me speaking, the reader, you make it easy for the reader to identify themselves in the cage by your story. And then you're also giving solutions on how to get out, and see, transformation. So it's amazing. What would you say is like your biggest takeaway that you would want your readers to get from the cage?
Oh, just one. Let's see. I would say that to know that you are divine. If you know nothing else, know that you are divine. You may not believe that right now, but if you can learn to just tap into yourself, you will see it. I know for a fact. So the biggest takeaway from every book, from every series that I create, is for you to discover your own divinity, right? So that's what I would say. That's the biggest, for me, the biggest takeaway. It's just know your truth. Part of your truth is that you are divine.
Yes, say it. I am divine. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's next with you, Naudia, and how can people stay connected?
Yeah, so after the cage, we will start the next book, which is called The Gardens. And that's really where the character Naraya taps into all of her, the roots of her wounds. So it goes really, really deep when you go into the gardens. So that's the next book, The Gardens. But if you want to get in contact with me, if you want to do a fast, or if you want to come to one of my future book signings, you can go to my website at rootedawakenings.com, or you can follow me on social media. It's Nadia Cartmel on all of my social platforms. I would love to hear from you, and I would love to even go on a journey with you if you so desire to do that.
Yes, thank you so much. And we'll have all the links for you guys in the comments below. And thanks for being here, Naudia. Such a success.
Thank you.